If you're looking for a recipe where carrots are truly the star of the show, this next one might be for you. Today I'm making carrot ginger soup, which is a great way to just pack in all those carrots, and it tastes great too. So a quick rundown of all my ingredients. I've pre-prepared them today because it's all pretty simple stuff. So I have a pound of carrots, which I've cut into coins, so it's about 3.5 to 4 cups, some onions, some garlic, ginger of course, my spices, salt, pepper, I have thyme, bay leaf, and a pinch of chili flakes, a little bit of cider vinegar, some vegetable broth, and we're gonna cook that all up in a little bit of butter. So pretty simple stuff. This recipe comes together really easily. So all that's left to do now is to head over to the stove and get cooking. All right, I'm gonna start by turning my heat up to about medium-low. And I'm gonna add my butter and let that melt. Shouldn't take long at all. Once that butter is melted, we can add our onions, our ginger and our garlic, all these wonderful flavors. And I'm gonna add all my spices as well. So I'm gonna give this a good stir, combine everything. And now I just want to let this cook and soften, develop some really nice flavors. So the onions are going to start to soften and caramelize. There's going to be a lot of great aromas developing here. So this can take anywhere from about 5 to 7 minutes here, and we're going to stir that occasionally. If your onions start to brown a little bit too quickly, just adjust the heat down a little bit, give it a stir, and carry on. So I'm going to let this cook now for a few minutes, and we'll get going on the next step. These onions have softened up nicely. They've developed a lot of great flavors. So now I'm gonna add my carrots. And I'm also going to add my broth. I'm not gonna add all of it here. I'm gonna add about 3 out of the 4 cups here because I wanna save some for later to adjust the consistency if it's a little bit too thick. So we're gonna add most but not all of this. I'm gonna turn the heat up a little bit to medium-high. And now we want to bring this to a boil, and we want to cook these until the carrots are very, very tender. Normally we don't want overcooked vegetables, but in this case, it doesn't matter because we want to puree them, so we do want them nice and soft. This might take up to 20 minutes or so. So once this comes to a boil, I'm going to reduce the heat down to medium or just below. You do want to maintain a little bit of a bubble in there, but you don't want it to be rapidly boiling because it might reduce down too much and you might lose a lot of your liquid. If that does happen though, you do have your reserved liquid here. You can top it up a little bit if you need to. So I'm gonna let this cook now and get nice and tender. My soup is done boiling here. The carrots are nice and tender, ready to go. So what I've done here is I've turned the heat right off, which is very important for the next step, which is the pureeing step. So I have with me here a immersion blender, also known as a stick blender, one of my favorite tools in the kitchen. You have some options here when it comes to pureeing your soup. If you want it to be perfectly silky smooth, your best option is going to be to transfer this in batches to a blender and do that way. It's going to become the most smooth version of the soup as you can get. But the next best thing is these immersion blenders, which is my personal preference. It's a little bit more convenient, less dishes, and it still makes a really nice smooth soup. So I'm going to go in with that right now. Very important to turn off the heat and just go slow. Should probably wear an apron for this, also in case it splashes, but apparently I like to live my life dangerously. Now the other nice thing about using an immersion blender is you can choose how pureed you want your soup. Some people like a little bit of texture in there, so you want some of the bigger pieces in there, so maybe partially pureed. And other people want it fully pureed. So with an immersion blender, you can control how far you go with the pureeing. So that's pretty close to where I want it here. Now what I want to do next is I'm going to bring this back onto the heat, just at a low heat, bring it back to a simmer, make sure it's nice and heated through. And I'm going to add my cider vinegar, which is going to bring a touch of brightness, a little bit of acidity to balance out the sweetness of the carrots, which really complements it nicely. Stir that in. And at this point as well, what you can do is if your soup is a little bit too thick, which tends to happen a little bit with carrot soups or squash soups, sometimes it starts looking a little bit like baby food and you don't want that. So if it's a little bit too thick, this is where you use your reserved broth that you've set aside to adjust the consistency back to where you want it, which is like a soup, right? So I'm going to bring this back up to a simmer, let it heat through, adjust any seasonings, and we're good to go after that. Just like that, our soup is done. It's a nice, quick and easy recipe, not a lot of ingredients, but not short on flavor. It tastes great. It's a great way to feature our carrots here and to get a lot of great nutrients as well. If you wanted to jazz this up a little bit, you could finish it off with a little bit of cream or sour cream on the top there, some fresh chives, maybe even some croutons if you wanted to, but even just on its own, it's a great soup. So hopefully you give this one a try at home and enjoy.